Welcome to the New Voices of Influence, a survey of emerging digital HCP opinion leaders produced by LiveWorld, a leader in HCP digital and social marketing. I'm Umar Siddiqui, Chief Medical Officer for LiveWorld. Our guest today is Dr. Jawad Ali, MD. Dr. Ali has a background in general surgery with expertise in acute care surgery, trauma, endoscopy, and robotic surgery. Dr. Ali also has a consulting practice, Validity Partners, which engages in early-stage medtech companies and advisory in surgical devices, mobile patient engagement, and digital surgery. In addition to his clinical and consultative work, Dr. Ali is the founder of Austin MedTech Connect, a medical technology hub. Welcome, Dr. Ali.
Thanks, Umar. Great to be here.
Can you please share a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So after coming to the U.S., actually around 12 years old, I did bioengineering at Texas A&M, went to a med school in San Antonio, and did my surgery residency in Austin, actually the first surgical residency class to graduate under the new Dell Medical School. After that, I did a fellowship in MIS Bariatrics and Advanced Endoscopy at UC Davis, practiced in Kaiser for a little bit, and then came back to Austin, Texas, to be closer to family and also kind of be part of the growing medtech scene here.
Do tell us about your practice and other professional activities and interests.
So in my clinical practice, which I'm a full-time practicing surgeon, I do a combination of acute care and trauma surgery, as well as elective general surgery. And on the elective side, my practice consists of general surgery, robotics, and then endoscopy as well.
In other conversations that we've had, it was noted that you are active and involved in organizing Austin practitioners. What's the purpose and objective of that?
During COVID, like a lot of people, I was doing a lot of Zoom networking, and I realized that there was way more people in Austin than I had realized, and that either they didn't know each other, or if they did, there was no central hub for them to engage with each other. And so with that in mind, I formed Austin MedTech Connect as an organization to break the silos in Central Texas. I just think there's so much potential in this region as medical technology goes from hardware to either software enhanced hardware or purely software as medical device. And I wanted to be a part of that journey and help catalyze the potential here.
That's great. So we've also observed this trend that you mentioned during COVID, that HCPs have become more digital and they've become more active on social media. So if you will, you yourself are active on social media. When and why did you decide to use some of these digital platforms?
That's a good question. So earlier, maybe like 5-10 years ago, I was only on Facebook. And on Facebook, I engaged with groups like the Robotic Surgery Collaborative. And there's a obesity journal called SWORD, Surgery for Obesity and Related Diseases. And Dr. Rich Peterson actually ran the SWORD Facebook Journal Club. I was helping him with that. I was part of those discussions. And I still go to those groups to engage in discussions around clinical areas. I think Twitter has a role to play. I'm not that active on Twitter myself. I feel like in this day and age, the classic academic journal readership is a little bit less. Most people don't subscribe to a print journal, get it in the mail, go through it cover to cover. I do that as much as I can, but not as much as I used to. I think more and more they're relying on becoming aware of new studies and practices through social media. And there's different ways to do that. I mean, I think ideally it's through some kind of peer-reviewed group, like, journal-led societies are good. Online collaboratives where you can clearly see who's who are good. And then, with visual abstracts, I used to make the visual abstracts for SWORD. I currently make them for the Artificial Intelligence Surgery Journal. I think those are great ways to kind of bring awareness to new topics, new research areas, and also drive people to the full journal article as well.
In addition to that, are there any particular platforms that you're on, and what do you do on them on a day-to-day basis per se?
So I'm still on Facebook, mostly on the social side. And then in my professional life, I'm almost exclusively on LinkedIn. And so really, I found LinkedIn to be an amazing community, both for networking. I find a lot of my consulting clients through engaging with other people, learning about what else is going on, growing a following, growing a brand. I think, when I talk to medical students or residents coming up, I think physicians having a personal brand is important, both for their clinical and non-clinical practices.
Oh, yes. That's what I've also personally noticed about LinkedIn over the years, is that where previously we had more non-clinical traditional HCPs, we're now seeing an increasing emergence of the clinical HCPs in practice.
whether seeking new career opportunities or looking at peer-shared research, as well as observing and discussing trending topics. So you've been able to find that balance between what's personal and what's professional in these social media platforms.
I mean, really on LinkedIn, I keep it very professional.
Yeah.
And then even on Facebook, I don't post very much personal. I feel like I'm maybe a little old school in that way. I post very little personal stuff on social media at all.
Yeah. From your perspective, in terms of personal experience, how important is it learning from your peers?
I think it's critical.
Yeah.
One struggle in the non-academic setting is to keep yourself exposed to new evidence and new practices and not, stay in the same practice patterns that you had when you were in training. And I think, unless you really expose yourselves to what's going on, especially through peers, because even when you read a journal article, it's hard to know how that applies to your specific context. But when you can have a peer say, I read this paper, I changed my practice like this, and it went well for me, or maybe it didn't go well for me, then I think that really helps you decide how to implement those different changes and, in what way. And I think, in surgery, it's a little bit different. I think we're often slow to adopt because we feel like we want to be safe more than anything. And so it's a balance between being safe and being current. And I think a way to keep moving forward is to use your peers as kind of a guidepost, because when people that you know and trust are changing, it helps motivate you and convince you that it's going to be safe for your patients also.
Yeah. And obviously, with things the way they are nowadays being more digital, things are changing as to how we're connecting with others, how we engage with others, and how we collaborate with others. So in terms of being online and with these available digital platforms, what do you do, whether it's for research or professional curiosity, and how do you go about doing that?
So on the research side, on the board of SWORD, on the board for artificial intelligence surgery, I'm working on a paper with SAGES around digital surgery. And I think it's important to stay involved in these groups. I think there's a lot of value in being collaborative and being engaged in communities. I think a lot of physicians struggle with the balance because most of these academic pursuits are not paid unless you're in an academic position and you have some FTE with that. And so it's just balancing that out, but it is valuable, and there's a lot of satisfaction in just engaging with your peers, and it's nice to kind of stay involved in that community. Otherwise, it can be kind of isolating in your individual practice. And so that's mostly through Facebook, and then on the LinkedIn side, as I said, mainly through sharing the visual abstracts, but then more so, I feel like the non-clinical activity is more present on the LinkedIn side.
Oh, I think you just read my mind, because I was just thinking that about you and how you participate in these HCP social groups and virtual journal clubs. Is there anything else and or similar that you can share, whether it's offline communities, private groups on Twitter, WhatsApp per se, Doximity and the like, or even a message group within your own tribe that you flock or migrate through? Namely, anything else that could be anywhere in terms of how you stay connected with your peers.
So on the non-clinical side, Nisha Mehta set up an awesome community with physician side gigs, and I think the name doesn't do it justice because people are doing so much more on there than just side gigs.
Yeah.
It kind of goes all the way from, staying like invested in your clinical practice to financial advice to, career advice to building non-clinical careers, people that are balancing that. So that's a huge community, and I think Nisha's done an awesome job with that. As far as more locally, we have our Austin MedTech Connect community that balances online engagement with physical events that we do, and we're looking to actually build our own community through the Hands-In platform, which I'm looking forward to kind of being a part of that and learning how to do that. Otherwise, I've more recently started doing marketing and branding for Validity Partners, which is a little bit of a teaser. So early in the next year, we'll have some new content coming out with that.
Oh, wow. All this sounds great, incredibly exciting. It sounds like that through a lot of these activities or avocations, if you will, you're a digital opinion leader. Would you identify yourself as one?
I think it's hard to self-classify as an opinion leader, but I do try to see what resonates. I do try to improve my writing skills. I do try to, be methodical and conscientious about engaging with people online. And I think that's an interesting skill set because it's not a skill set that clinicians traditionally are trained in or is fostered. but I do think it's important. And so, I think what I can say is I'm definitely trying to get there.
Well, I'll be the one to say it. We think you're a great digital opinion leader.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Umar.
Yeah. So with that said, what information sources do you rely on to keep up with your specialty and patient care?
I still subscribe to Journal of American College of Surgeons, to Surgical Endoscopy, and I get those journals in print still. I try to read them. And then, other journals, especially if they're open source, like Journal of Artificial Intelligence Surgery, it's nice to kind of get them in my email inbox, scroll through the titles, and go through the papers that way. Otherwise, I think visual abstracts are a great way because it's shared by a peer, and so it's kind of self-filtered. Like they think this paper is important. Reading the visual abstract gives me like a 5-second way to see what the paper is about. Then hopefully there's a link to the full paper. So I think in the next 5-10 years, it's going to be a really important way for clinicians to share and consume new information.
Would you say there's a hierarchy amongst them?
Yeah, especially, in the case of like LinkedIn or even Twitter, like you're already there and all of us want to be better. And so if we're already there and something comes across that we're like, hey, maybe this could make my practice better, we're going to go down that road versus it's a little bit of a sidetrack to take time out of your day, right? Whether, you're seeing patients or you're at home, to pick up that journal and spend the time reading through a paper without knowing initially at the beginning if that's really that relevant or what the authority is promoting that. I mean, if you know the authors, that's one thing, but I think it's even more relevant if it's someone you personally know recommending that.
And to come full circle, as you had mentioned, your interests and activities in the medical devices space and technology, how would you characterize your relationship and point of view with pharma and life sciences companies?
One problem that we're trying to address is that the voice of the frontline clinician is often hard to access for early stage medical devices and also actually early stage investors. And so, we saw last year, for example, a lot of these health tech, med tech companies got a lot of funding, but then they weren't as successful as they wanted to be. I think part of that reason was when kind of the aspirations and hopes meet the reality of a difficult clinical environment. That's when, the expectations meet reality. And so we're trying to do two big things. One is keep the perspective of the clinician relevant and in perspective when these technologies are being developed and deployed. And the other thing is that help these companies and investors be successful.
Oh, I definitely get where you're coming from in terms of the early stage advocacy and blue sky ideation. So we'll further take it back to pharma and life science companies. What's your opinion of them with regards to how it's been, how it's changing, and perhaps due to COVID and the new ways of working, how it's going to trend?
I'm mostly focused on med device and digital surgery, although more recently, I feel like as the software focus comes into play for us, there's more crossover with the pharma side. I know there's a lot of activity in the genomics field and in individualized medicine and even therapy for rare diseases and things like that. I think as, the AI-enabled tools become more powerful and accessible and also more approved in terms of the regulatory pathway, I think we're going to see a lot more activity and success both for companies and for patients actually as some of these tools and technologies become mainstream.
Okay, now let's take a step back and put on your scrubs in the OR and get a clinician point of view in terms of how pharma is engaging with surgeons, HCPs. What is the good, the bad, or ugly elements as to how they engage?
In general, I feel like in the healthcare environment, there is restrictions on engagement between salespeople and industry with clinicians, definitely when you're in the hospital. And that's for obvious reasons. So I think companies have had to find other ways to engage. It's no longer that face-to-face easy access. And I think LinkedIn is an awesome tool for that because, let's say a salesperson has an established brand on LinkedIn and they have established connections. Now people can not only see their content as trusted content, but there's an easy way to just message them, interact, get into a conversation, and move things forward that way. I think the same applies for me as an independent consultant as it applies to a large, pharma company trying to get awareness and access to their products. I think it revolves around having a brand and an ecosystem online, and then ways to engage with specific clinicians, and a strategy for doing that and tracking that. And I think that's kind of the next generation of sales and marketing in the pharma life science community. And I think people are catching on to that and building around it, but it's still developing.
Are there any other ways or aspects and things that they could do better, such as information, research, or data?
Data is always going to be compelling. I think it's the combination of access and then trust and then delivering the data within that context, if that makes sense. So like if there is an engagement on LinkedIn, for example, and I like this person, what they're saying, and I like the way they say it, and then now they present me with information that's going to be more powerful than I see an advertisement in a journal, and it presents me like a chart or something like that. And so I think data is always powerful, especially clinicians. We love to see data. We love to say that we're data, based or evidence based. But I think it's providing that access to the information and then having the trust to really allow for either us to take action around it or to keep that conversation going.
So in a perfect world, a perfect OR or a perfect day, face-to-face is ideal for them. Can they engage otherwise?
I think, there are ways to engage outside of the clinical setting that are beyond like the steak dinners that we're familiar with. And so a little bit selfishly, I feel like Austin MedTech Connect is a great opportunity for industry to engage with clinicians, not just to promote their products, but to learn what the clinicians' problems are in a less formal setting, right? Like in the hospital, if there's a person from industry, I kind of expect them to push their product. But outside of that setting, when that expectation isn't there, I'm more open to just having a conversation, getting to know somebody, and then now they have the opportunity to not just tell me what they're doing, but to learn from me what my problems are. And I think that's when the most effective, conversations and sales happen, is it's addressing my problem, not me being asked to try something.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ali, for sharing your insights and your point of view. How can our audience get in touch with you?
Great to be here, Umar. Thanks for the opportunity. The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn at Jawad Ali MD. If you want to check out Validity Partners, it's validitypartners.com. And then austinmedtech.org is the website for Austin MedTech Connect.
Oh, I have a great feeling about that quite a few will be reaching out to you. For more information about emerging HCP opinion leaders and influencers, please contact me, Umar, at liveworld.com. So that's UMAR at liveworld.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much.